9 News Plus weather, sponsored by Carrier Colorado. The future of home comfort is here.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm meteorologist Chris Bianchi with meteorologist, severe weather guru, severe weather chaser.
I got a lot of slashes in my business card.
yeah. I would say the top one would be meteorologist. Second one would be storm chaser extraordinaire.
Yeah, I'll go with that number 2, and then maybe some sort of journalist after that.
That's down the road.
Yeah.
Because today is going to be a storm chasing day for today. So top line takeaways for those of you joining us here on 9 News Plus. Today looks like the potential for a high impact severe weather day, including the entire Denver metro area. Large hail, damaging winds, even a few tornadoes. Highest threat looks to be later. So for those of you who've been here in Colorado for a long time, we tend to think of our thunderstorms between about 2 and 6 p.m. most of the time. Today's looks to be later than that, with perhaps an overnight threat for severe storms. That's why we got Corey here to kind of break things on down. Corey, you're a severe weather expert, guru. How would you assess today and what we could see today?
Well, I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and it really is a rare threat. It's one of the more dangerous severe weather threats I've seen in probably the last 5 years. 2017 comes to mind when we had 2 big ones, one on May 8th and one on June 12th. And so the similarities is the moisture. We're all feeling it. You can feel it out there. You can even see the moisture in the air today.
There it is.
So yeah, I mean,
this is Lookout Mountain right now.
That's not smoke.
That is not smoke. It looks like South Florida right now.
It is. I mean, that is a product of actually seeing the air moving in. The dew points in the 60s and 70s. Haven't seen a 70-degree dew point in a few years, so it's very unusual. And then the thing that makes it also an extra dangerous is the way that the winds are crossing each other. So you have winds coming out of the southwest above us, and then you have winds at the surface going up the slope, and so they're countering each other. And as you look at the atmosphere, it turns with height. So as it goes up, it turns, and so that means all the thunderstorms will be rotating, and that keeps the updrafts clear, and so they can maintain that updraft, which creates bigger hail and potential for even tornadoes down in the bottom. So that's why all those things you mentioned are in play today.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I kind of want to go through the graphics quickly here, Corey. So this is Lookout Mountain again. It looks like South Beach right now. That's a problem when it looks like that here in the high desert. That is not a something. Well, that means that there's potential for severe storms. Again, there is a level 3 on a 0 to 5 scale in terms of that risk for severe storms, that orange shading. Not something we often see. In fact, this is our second enhanced risk for severe weather in the last 5 years. So Corey, again, kind of just emphasizing how unusual it is today's severe weather threat is.
Yeah, and a lot of people will look at that scale and say 3 out of 5. That there's a couple of things with that. 3 in Colorado is a little bit stronger than elsewhere, because one of the reasons why you see it in the enhanced and not in, say, the moderate or high is because of the coverage. So we're looking at not a huge amount of coverage in that area. So we're talking about maybe 3-4 thunderstorm cells that are capable of producing that golf ball and bigger size hail and tornadoes. And so, but when you talk about that in a populated area like the Front Range and even parts just east of the Front Range between Greeley and Fort Morgan, you're talking a lot of people that are impacted. So when I see enhanced, like you said, we haven't had, this is only the second one in about 5 years. So this is something to definitely be taken seriously.
Yeah. So and large hail after dark. Again, I want to reemphasize the unusual timing of this, and we're going to walk you through the forecast radar here in just a second. Corey, I made this without your input. So what do you think? Is this right here?
This I would agree with for the Denver metro area.
Hail's going to be the big concern, and again tonight.
Yeah, all the way, I think even past midnight possibly. Would you say even past midnight with this severe weather threat? So I think, we even have flood watch for the Eastern Plains this evening. So we're talking about an extreme amount of moisture in these storms. So we'll see the flood watch out on the Eastern Plains, and that's another element to all this that we will have to be dealing with when we go through this.
And speaking of the moisture here, Corey, I wanted to pull this graphic up because this is the number that matters. And for a lot of you out there, you might be wondering, what is this number? Who cares about a dew point? A dew point is the amount measured the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. For the Denver area, when any time, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, to me, one of the signals that we're going to have the potential for a bad severe weather day is we get about 10 to 15 days a year where we get a dew point at 60 or above here in Denver. I actually did an analysis about this a couple of years ago. We only get about 10 to 15 of these a year. You couple that with what you were talking about, those veering winds.
Yeah.
This is what that combination is what's really setting things off.
Yeah, the ingredients are just unbelievably high today. So when we talk about all the big hailstorms that we've had in the past, especially the ones in 2017, the main ingredient is those dew points getting upwards near 60 and above, and we're talking about 62 in Denver, 70 out on the Eastern Plains. So the ingredients are there. So every time we have a big hail, damaging hail event, they are days like this. So if you look at probability, we're just kind of looking at that. The chances of something really bad happening with hail or tornadoes today is very low, but when those very bad things happen, they happen on days like this. So that's probability, still low, but much higher today than it is any other day.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, maybe if you had to put it in a different way in percentages or something, it'd be like, I don't know, today is like a 5% chance, which is still very low, but it's normally maybe a 0.1 to 1% chance. Is that a way to look at it?
Exactly, and that is exactly how the Storm Prediction Center lays out their tornado probability. So today, really just before we came on here,
I can pull that up here quick.
They moved the tornado risk here all the way. So that blue area there, that's the 2%. Actually, was that the 2%? I think.
Yeah, that is a 2% and the 5%.
It was just to the east of the Denver metro when we woke up this morning, and after the Storm Prediction Center kind of analyzed the ingredients, they pushed that 2% all the way to the foothills. And so that is literally saying that everybody in a stationary location standing in one spot has a 2% chance of being impacted by a tornado today. And that is very high.
For the Front Range.
For the Front Range, for anywhere, honestly. Because tornadoes are, when you think about it, they're actually very small. they impact a very small area, and they're very hard to produce. So not only do you have the ingredients to get them produced today, but there's enough area where everybody in our area has at least a 2% chance of being impacted by a tornado today.
So blue 150 and in dark green a 1 in 20 chance.
Exactly.
Up in Fort Morgan, Sterling, and Eastern Weld County.
Yep. And I would say that the risk may be even higher for Weld County, Morgan County, and Logan County, just because of the way that the Cheyenne Ridge sticks out there. You have the upslope winds coming out of the east, and you have the winds veering over the top from the southwest. So you really get that turning around the Cheyenne Ridge on a day like this. And the same could be said for the Palmer Divide, but with the upper winds going much faster to the north, that's a higher probability. But the Palmer Divide is kind of an outlier in this scenario here. If I lived in Castle Rock, Kiowa, I would be on the lookout for large hail and possibly funnel clouds and tornadoes today.
Speaking of which, so kind of getting to the forecast computer models here, that's basically what you're saying here, right? I mean, you mentioned Elbert County and specifically Kiowa, kind of Highway 86 out there, and it looks like that we see some pretty big storms develop there around 3-4 o'clock initially. So again, walking through the timeline, it looks like those storms will develop in the foothills first. They'll go from west to east, and once they get a little further east of Denver, that's when they develop and get really, really strong, perhaps?
That would be the ideal scenario. So, and when we look at these future casts, it's kind of simulating the model, what it thinks that the radar will kind of look like as we go through time here. And when we think about it, there is a lid on the atmosphere. There's a little bit of a warm air on top that's kind of holding everything down, and it's kind of, think of it as a kettle where everything's kind of boiling underneath that lid. And we've seen days where storms are just not able to break through that, but most likely that will happen today. And one of the things that initially happens is that the air will ride up some sort of a slope. Could be the Cheyenne Ridge, could be the Palmer Divide, but most likely the foothills are much taller, and the air kind of utilizes that to get lift, to get beyond that cap, that
like
lid.
A slide, basically.
Exactly. It just slide right up and burst through that cap, and so you get the first batch of storms usually kind of along the foothills there. But I would not be surprised to get a storm on the Cheyenne Ridge by 2 o'clock very soon here, as even the Cheyenne Ridge sticks up just enough to stack the air above it and get the storms to break through the cap. So we may get some initial storms even in Weld County, Morgan County, as early as 1:30, 2 o'clock.
And these are the ones, though, come 5, 6 o'clock, these are probably the ones with the highest tornado probability, right? These would be the ones where maybe, I think the hail threat's going to be there basically all night long just because of the amount of moisture, but maybe the tornado probability specifically would be highest around 5, 6 o'clock?
I would absolutely agree with that. The one thing that's different about Colorado is land spouts, and that is when the tornado forms on the ground before the storm. So it doesn't really need the storm to pop. So if you think about it as some sort of a boundary up there with the winds going over the top and on the bottom at different directions, you kind of get a little bit of a circulation on the air. And so when the storms initially pop, they can pull that boundary up and create a tornado, which we call land spouts, which are weaker and short-lived, but they are real tornadoes. They're attached to the cloud and the ground. So you see those initially, and then as we go on into the day, we're talking about a supercell tornado threat, which are the more damaging tornadoes that you can see on radar and actually form from the rotating thunderstorms. So we'll have those two kind of different tornado scenarios going through, and then as we go into the later on part of the night, you can almost see a scenario coming together where the storms form kind of a squall line or like a mini derecho and pushes across the eastern plains.
Going back to here.
And if you look at this simulation, you kind of see a kind of a linear fashion there where the storms form this kind of bow Out in front of that tonight, we could see winds up to 100 miles an hour as straight line winds out in front of these storms, which if you think about it, we always talk about tornadoes because they're so menacing, but 100-mile-an-hour straight line wind in front of these storms could possibly do more damage than a small short-lived tornado.
Yeah, and it's always worth noting that. So maybe here for the metro area, and this is a different computer forecast model, and just keep in mind here, folks, these are not necessarily our forecasts. We just want to tell you straight up that the threat for large hail is going to include the entire Denver metro area after dark tonight, right? I mean, we're talking 8 p.m., 4 a.m., unusual timing, but because of the unusual amount of moisture that we've got, that threat's going to last well into the evening. Normally here in Colorado, you lose that moisture come 5, 6, 7 o'clock, and that really reduces that threat for severe storms. Tonight, a different situation. So, DIA on north and east, 6, 7 o'clock. Notice those kind of purples, those grays, those kind of lighter shadings. That tells us that we've got some really nasty storms going to be pushing through that region, 7, 8 o'clock. And then notice 1 a.m. here, Corey, showing one storm over Highlands Ranch, but it could easily be more than that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is you don't look at these high-resolution computer models for location, but you look for characteristics. And when I see a model like this creating a storm that organized with magenta, pink, red in it, anywhere in the metro area, that opens your mind to the possibilities that we could have hail in excess of 1 inch, larger than 1 inch, all the way past midnight tonight. So that doesn't show you, that doesn't say, hey, Highlands Ranch is going to get hit at this time. It just says the metro area can get a large storm late tonight.
And we were saying this before we kind of came on the air here. I think there's a pretty good likelihood that somebody in the metro area late tonight is going to have that potential. Would you say there's a certain spot in the metro area that overnight tonight will have a better chance than others?
I mean, I kind of do agree with this computer model solution, where if you look at the linear fashion of the way that the energy moves back towards the east, you kind of start to focus from the north in the day and towards the south at night. So, I mean, and this model does kind of show a little bit more emphasis towards the south. I would feel that, Douglas County, Elbert County, for instance, later on tonight. And this happens so many times in scenarios like this, where we'll get a wave of thunderstorms that move through the metro at like 5:30, and then it just seems like maybe the storm is over, and so people kind of take their cars out of the garage, make plans for dinner, and then at 10 o'clock you get hit by another storm, and you're thinking, what happened here?
Yeah.
But it really is a potential all night long.
And by the way, tomorrow, don't want to overlook tomorrow either, because tomorrow there's a threat for severe storms. It's a bit cloudier, a bit cooler tomorrow. Maybe not quite as much moisture initially, but Corey, the slight risk, the level 2 on a 0 to 5 scale, includes Denver once again for tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think that we will see another round of very large storms tomorrow.
Tomorrow afternoon, right? This is not
afternoon.
Tomorrow overnight looks calmer than tonight.
Right. Yeah, I think that threat will be kind of more the traditional 2 to 7, 2 to 6 scenario, and I think the storm coverage will be less, so there won't be as many thunderstorms tomorrow. But the thunderstorms that do come tomorrow, I think, will be just as strong as they are today.
Okay, so less storms, and the potential, when you get little meteorology 101, there's a term called discrete supercells, which are ones that sit by themselves. They have the ability to absorb more energy, more moisture, and I don't know, think about, you have a buffet and you have to share it with 7 kids, but you're maybe an only child tomorrow, right?
That's exactly it. Today, I feel like the storms may be competing for the amount of energy that's in the atmosphere, where tomorrow the storms will have the entire dinner table to themselves. And so we could get some of those discrete storms tomorrow, which...
you see it here. I mean, there's maybe 1 or 2 stronger storms, while tonight maybe a bit more of a line and a lot more coverage.
Exactly. So I think both days, tonight and tomorrow, it's just going to be a long stretch of keeping your eyes on the skies.
So next, the good news is, this is something that kind of worries you. By the way, rain, we don't want to overlook this because the flash flood threat is there. There's a flood watch up for, we all know the South Platte River going through some minor flooding right now. Badger Creek, also seeing some of that as well out in Elbert County. Once we get past this, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, looking way, way better. So if you're looking for some relief from all this stormy weather, it looks like an extended dry period starting perhaps Friday and certainly by Saturday, right?
Yeah, and I think that's important to mention too, because we just went through 40 days where it almost rained on end. So we're more in a traditional pattern now where we get a storm system coming through, every 5 to 10 days where, and we're not really in that blocking pattern. We're just in more of a traditional summer thunderstorm mode.
Absolutely, and just kind of sum things on up as hopefully this has been informative, giving you probably far more detail than you ever asked for, but you know what, that's what we're here for. And we have the format here on 9 News Plus to be able to do that, to be able to talk about this in length. Top line takeaways: severe storms possible as early as maybe 2, 3, 4 o'clock this afternoon in the foothills, usual time. What is unusual about today, one, the threat for severe storms is notably higher than usual, and especially for large hail, and especially the timing is going to be very unusual with the possibility of seeing those storms as late as maybe 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So an overnight threat for severe storms.
Absolutely. There you go.
Any final takeaways? Any thoughts about the threat?
No, I mean, just the probability is just such an interesting thing. We're on an elevated opportunity, so I feel like there's going to be some areas that really get impacted by large hail today and damaging winds, but you're still looking at a good portion of the Denver metro area, or even in the May 8th storm, there was a massive baseball-sized hail falling, but 80% of the metro didn't get any hail that day. So you kind of have to be looking out for everybody else and hope that you're not in that area that gets hit today. That's basically all it is.
It's all probability at the end of the day. And to be clear, most of you probably will not see, as you said, 90% of you probably will not see a high impact severe storm tonight. Problem is the 10% that does could get a really bad storm.
Yep.
So anyways, well, we'll leave it at that. Meteorologist Corey Reppenhagen, he'll be out in the field on 9 News throughout the day, and I think throughout the night as well, right?
Yep.
And sorry, I had to cough there. I'm meteorologist Chris Bianchi. I'll have another update for you coming up at 9 News at noon, and also at 2 p.m. here on 9 News Plus. We'll have cut-ins throughout the day, and then Chief Meteorologist Kathy Stevens in at 4 and 5, and Meteorologist Danielle Grant in at 6, 9, 10 tonight, and maybe later. I've been texting Danielle, yeah. Hopefully Danielle's got some coffee in her for tonight. But meantime, thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and keep us in mind for the rest of your severe weather coverage for the rest of the afternoon and evening.